When my daughter tied the knot with a fortune hunter who was only interested in our family's wealth, I realized I had to construct something unbreakable to safeguard her. I never whispered a word to her about what was truly hidden inside that dilapidated storage unit downtown. My son-in-law, Julian, always viewed it with utter disdain. "Arthur, why don't you just clear out that pile of rusted junk already?" he'd sneer. He had no clue that the dusty, rusty unit would be the very instrument of his downfall. I have weathered his manipulations for 3 agonizing years, waiting for this precise second, the day his trap snaps shut and the truth finally emerges into the light. Before we unlock the mystery of that storage unit, show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to join this channel. We would love to know which part of the world you are joining us from today. Please remember, while this story is grounded in real-life lessons, names and details have been fictionalized for your entertainment. Stay tuned. The lesson ahead is one you won't want to miss. 1 year after everything crumbled, I am recounting the story from the perspective of that year. My name is Arthur Sterling. I am 64 years old and I reside in Los Angeles. It is the kind of city where the sun beats down relentlessly, where palm trees stand like sentinels along the boulevards, and where people reinvent their identities as easily as changing clothes. That is a lesson I learned the hard way. I have spent a lifetime in this metropolis, raising my daughter here after my beloved wife, Martha, passed away 12 years ago. I thought I had steeled myself for whatever curveballs life might throw. It turns out, I was woefully unprepared. My daughter's name is Alina. She is 31 now, sharp as a tack, with a heart of gold, the type of person who searches for the good in others even when it isn't there to be found. 3 years ago, she married a man named Julian Thorne. I recall the wedding with crystal clarity. On the surface, it was a fairy tale. The venue was breathtaking, draped in white silk. The flowers released a scent that reminded me of paradise. Everyone grinned for the cameras. But as I stood there watching my daughter glide down the aisle, I felt a knot of dread tighten in my gut. It wasn't happiness, it was a primal warning. I remained silent that day. I smiled until my face hurt. I embraced them both. I delivered a toast that elicited laughter from the crowd, but I had already glimpsed something in Julian's eyes, a way he gazed at Alina that was fundamentally wrong. It was possessive, predatory, as if she were an asset he had acquired rather than a woman he cherished. At that time, I was already harboring a secret. For 12 years since Martha died, I had been renting a storage unit in the industrial district. Not because I was a hoarder or lacked space at the villa. I rented it because I needed a sanctuary, a fortress essentially, where I could secure the things that held real value. Martha's personal documents, her heirloom jewelry, the insurance policies, the last will and testament, and the trust papers that guaranteed Alina's future. Everything that narrated the true history of our family's financial standing. Most acquaintances dismissed that storage unit as a dumping ground for old furniture. When I brought it up in casual conversation, I would receive that pitying look, the one that asked, "Why do you cling to the past?" I let them believe it was just sentimental junk. It was safer that way. But the reality is, I had spent years constructing a bastion of defense for my daughter. Martha and I had designed it together before she succumbed to her illness. We had crafted a prenuptial agreement, a family trust, and a substantial life insurance policy that would funnel directly into that trust. We ensured Alina would never be destitute, regardless of what life threw at her. I never revealed any of this to Alina. That was the burden I carried. When she married Julian, I ensured she had zero access to that storage unit. I kept the key on my person, hidden in a secret pocket of my wallet. I couldn't articulate why at the time, not logically. I just felt it in my marrow. Something about Julian was off. For the first 2 years of their union, I observed. I had dinner with Alina whenever she was allowed to see me. I called her dutifully. I began to notice the subtle shifts. The way Julian would steer every conversation toward finances, the way he would interrogate her about my estate plans, the way he would gently but firmly discourage her from visiting me. I started maintaining a log, just minor observations scrawled in a leather-bound notebook I kept locked in my mahogany desk drawer. Then Robert called. Robert Vance has been my confidant for 33 years. He isn't the type to panic or embellish. So when he phoned me one humid afternoon, 3 years into Alina's marriage, and confessed that he had overheard Julian speaking to a stranger about me, about the value of my life insurance, about how it would all revert to Alina, and about how much simpler life would be if I simply ceased to exist, I believed him. Robert is a man of integrity. He wasn't calling to create gossip. He was calling because he was genuinely petrified. That was the moment everything clicked. All those years of silence, all those concealed documents, all that fortification I had built around Alina, it had all been for this impending storm. I didn't realize it then, but my life's work had been a prelude to this single conversation with my oldest friend, where he confirmed that my son-in-law was capable of unspeakable malice. I ended the call and sat in my living room as the shadows lengthened. I thought about Martha. I thought about how adamant she had been about the prenup, how she had insisted on the trust. I remembered the letters I found after she passed, notes that seemed to imply a premonition. She had written, "Protect Alina with ironclad paper, not just words. Shield her from those who view love as a transaction." I never fully grasped the weight of those letters until that day. Suddenly, it dawned on me that I had been training for this battle my entire life. I retrieved that leather notebook. I reviewed 3 years of scribbles, and I finally accepted that the time for passive observation was over. It was time to act. It was time to unseal that storage unit. It was time to reveal to Alina exactly what I had been shielding her from. But I had no concept then of the lengths Julian was willing to go to, or how much shattering truth my daughter would have to absorb to survive him. After Robert's warning, my memory drifted back to the genesis of it all. Back to that Sunday dinner when Alina first introduced Julian. I was stirring sauce at the stove when she walked through the door, and the realization hit me instantly. It took exactly 15 seconds to discern that this man was a different breed from any suitor she had brought home before, and not in a favorable way. Alina looked radiant. She possessed that luminescence people have when they believe they have discovered their soulmate. She introduced Julian with pride, her hands seeking his instinctively. They appeared to fit together perfectly, at least to the naked eye. But something in the way Julian assessed the room made my skin crawl. He was undeniably handsome, I will grant him that. Tall, dark hair perfectly coiffed, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He knew how to flash a smile at the precise moment and laugh at the dullest jokes. He complimented the aroma of the dinner before he had even tasted a bite. He asked about my career, my decades in Lowe's Angels, the architecture of the house, all the polite questions, delivered with impeccable timing. But beneath the charm, there was a cold calculation, an appraisal I could sense even if I couldn't prove it. When we sat down to eat, Julian turned to me with a casual, almost bored tone. "This is a magnificent estate, Arthur. How long have you held the deed?" It wasn't idle chit-chat. I had learned to read men after 64 years, and I could practically hear the gears grinding behind his eyes. He wasn't asking out of architectural interest. He was an auditor, tallying the balance sheet, trying to estimate his potential return on investment. 40 years, I answered briefly, slicing into my salmon. "Martha and I purchased it together." He nodded, filing that data away like a shark smelling blood. Must be sitting on a gold mine of equity by now. LA real estate only moves in one direction, right? Alina laughed, a nervous tinkle of sound. "Julian, we just arrived. Let's not talk business." But I had already seen it. The way he glanced at her when she spoke his name, like she was a trophy he had already won. It wasn't the gaze of a man in love. It was the look of a man who had identified his target and was methodically moving to acquire it. Martha used to speak of this years ago. She would say, "Arthur, true love doesn't need to audit you. Love doesn't keep a ledger." I recalled those words, sitting at my own dining table, watching Julian ask Alina to pass the salt while his eyes remained locked on the antique chandelier, assessing its resale value. He probed about my investments that night, whether I traveled often, and crucially, whether I carried significant life insurance. That last inquiry nearly made me drop my fork, though I kept my composure. He framed it as concern, mentioning a policy he had at his firm, but the timing was predatory. "Everyone needs a safety net," he said, beaming at Alina. "You never know when tragedy strikes." Alina squeezed his hand, blissfully ignorant of the subtext. To her, this was her partner bonding with her father. She had no idea that every question was him testing the perimeter of the fortress he intended to siege. After dinner, Julian insisted on helping me clear the table. For a fleeting moment, we were alone in the kitchen, and I felt tea. He weight of his facade drop. It was subtle, a hardening of the jaw, a coldness in the eyes when he thought Alina was out of earshot. "You've done well for yourself, Arthur," he remarked, stacking plates. "Alina is lucky to have this level of security waiting for her." There it was, not I am lucky to have Alina, not we are going to build a life, but Alina is lucky to have this security, as if her only purpose was to be the conduit for my assets. I didn't reply, I just continued rinsing the china. Later that night, I sat in my study with a tumbler of scotch. Martha's photo sat on the shelf, smiling from a time when life was simpler. I stared at her for a long hour. She would have spotted the danger immediately. She would have known that Julian Thorne wasn't interested in our daughter's soul, but in her inheritance. That night I made a pact with myself. I wouldn't confront Alina yet. She wouldn't believe me. She was already head over heels. If I spoke too soon, I would be the villain in their love story, pushing her right into his arms. So I decided to become a ghost in my own life, watching, listening, waiting. I opened a fresh page in the leather notebook and dated it. Sunday, first meeting with Julian Thorne. I wrote down everything, the appraisal of the house, the questions about insurance, the coldness in the kitchen. I told myself I was just being a paranoid father, but deep down I knew I was starting a case file. The real warning shot came 6 months into their marriage. It was insidious. Alina called me, her voice sounding small and confused. "Dad, Julian thinks I should be more involved in the family trust," she said hesitantly. "He says it's bizarre that I don't know the specifics of your net worth. He thinks you're hiding things from me." I felt a chill radiate through my chest. This was the wedge. "What did you tell him?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I said I never worried about it," Alina replied. "But now I'm wondering, why are you so secretive, Dad?" Of course, it seemed secretive to her now. Julian had reframed her reality. A week later, the second blow landed. "Dad," she said, sounding upset. "Julian says Robert has always had a crush on me. He says Robert told him our marriage is a sham and he wants to break us up." I went rigid. Robert, my brother in all but blood. Julian was lying to my daughter to sever her lifeline to the outside world. "Alina, that is a fabrication. Robert would never." "How do you know?" she snapped. "Julian wouldn't lie to me. He says he's just looking out for me." He was isolating her, systematically cutting the cords that connected her to reality. Over the next few weeks, I watched Alina drift away from Robert. She stopped returning his calls. She looked at him with suspicion. This was when I realized Julian wasn't just a gold digger, he was a psychological predator. He wanted total control, her mind, her relationships, her reality. I returned to the storage unit the next morning. I sat amidst the dust motes dancing in the dim light, surrounded by the smell of old paper and memories. I opened the notebook. May 15th, 2021. Alina seems distant. Julian is rewriting her history. By June, the entries were grim. June 3rd. Julian gripped Alina's arm when she laughed too loudly. It wasn't affection, it was a leash. July 12th. Julian checked her phone while she was in the restroom. He did it with the entitlement of a jailer. August 8th. He told her I was too old to understand their modern love. He is positioning me as the enemy. By December, I had filled 200 pages. The pattern was undeniable: isolation, financial control, psychological manipulation. And now the fourth stage was emerging: the targeting of my life. 3 years, that is how long I endured it. 3 years of Sunday dinners where I played the doting, oblivious father while Julian played the perfect husband. 3 years of biting my tongue until it bled. By year 2, Alina had no friends left. Julian had poisoned every well. He took control of her bank accounts for transparency. And then the bruises started. First on her arm, a fall, then her hip, a door frame. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm his condo and tear him apart. But I knew that without irrefutable proof, Alina would defend him. She was deep in the fog of abuse. So I wrote. I documented every bruise, every inconsistency, every tear. I was building a mountain of evidence in that cold steel locker. Then came the call from Robert. "Arthur, we need to meet, now." I met him at a cafe. He looked haggard. "I ran into Alina," he said, his voice trembling. "She has bruises, Arthur, dark ones. And when I pressed her, she admitted Julian told her that if she snitched to you, he would hurt you." I stood up, my chair scraping violently against the floor. "I'm going to get her." "Wait," Robert said. "There's more. He threatened to make you pay. He's escalating, Arthur. He's not just abusive, he's dangerous." "I don't care," I said, grabbing my key. "Wise, I'm bringing my daughter home tonight." Driving to their condo in Malibu, the ocean looked like black ink. I had spent 3 years preparing for this, but now that it was here, I was terrified. Not for me, but for her. Julian had made a fatal error. He had threatened me, and he had put it into words. He had given me the green light to stop documenting and start warring. When I arrived, the tension in the air was thick enough to choke on. Alina let me in, and the moment I saw the purple mark on her cheek, the dam broke. I didn't scream. I didn't attack Julian. I simply said, "Pack your bag, Alina. We are leaving." Julian tried to block the door, smug and confident. "She's not going anywhere, old man." "Robert is on his way," I lied, or maybe I hoped. "And I have 800 pages of journals in a secure location detailing every single thing you've done for 3 years. Every threat, every bruise, every stolen dollar." Julian's face went pale. The mention of documentation spooked him. Bullies hate paper trails. Alina looked at me, confusion warring with fear. "Dad, what journal?" "We are leaving," I repeated. And this time, seeing the resolve in my eyes, Julian stepped aside. He was calculating, wondering what I knew. Back at my house with Robert present, I opened the spare copy of the journal I had brought. I read to Alina dates, times, quotes she thought were private, gaslighting she thought was love. June 3rd, September 12th, February 14th. As I read, the denial in Alina's eyes began to fracture. She wept, not a gentle cry, but the heaving sobs of someone realizing their life has been a horror movie. "I didn't know you saw," she whispered. "I thought I was hiding it." "You can't hide from a father who is looking for you," I said gently. But the nightmare wasn't over. 2 months later, Julian made his move. He began harassing us. He called, demanding money, demanding the house. "You're being selfish, Arthur," he screamed over the phone. "That asset belongs to us." "It belongs to the trust," I said calmly, "and you will never touch it." Desperation makes men sloppy. Julian realized his long con had failed. He couldn't charm the money out of us, so he decided to take it by force. A week later, Henry Gibbs, the manager at the storage facility, called me. "Mr. Sterling, someone tried to bolt cut the lock on your unit. A man, late 30s, angry." My blood ran cold. Julian had found the fortress. He knew something was in there. He didn't know it was documents. He probably thought it was cash or gold. He was desperate. "Did he get in?" "No, we chased him off, but he threatened to come back." I called the police, then I called Robert. "He's escalating. He tried to break into the unit." "He's running out of options," Robert said grimly, "and a rat in a corner bites." That night, Robert and I sat in my study. He's not after the house anymore, I realized aloud. He knows he can't get the title. He's after the life insurance. If I die, the money flows to Alina, and in her grief, he thinks he can manipulate her back. He's planning to kill you, Robert said, stating the fact as if discussing the weather. We hired a private investigator. We put cameras everywhere. And then late one night, Robert showed up at my door, white as a sheet. He followed me to the hardware store. Look. He played a video from his phone. Julian shopping for rope, tarp, and industrial solvent. He looked calm, focused. It was the shopping list of a murderer. We went to Detective Miller the next morning. We laid it all out. The journals, the break-in attempt, the threats, the video of the murder kit. Detective Miller looked at the pile of evidence. "This is comprehensive," he said. "We have enough for a search warrant and an arrest for conspiracy and attempted assault." The police set up a sting. They waited. When Julian showed up at my house the next night, thinking I was alone, thinking he could execute his final plan, he didn't find a helpless old man. He found a fortress that was ready for war. He broke the back window. He crept into the living room, a crowbar in hand. The lights flicked on. Julian Thorne dropped the weapon. The look on his face wasn't regret. It was pure, unadulterated shock. He was tackled, cuffed, and dragged out screaming that it was all a misunderstanding. Alina watched from the top of the stairs, her hand over her mouth, seeing the monster unmasked finally. In the aftermath, after the police left and the silence returned, I took Alina to the storage unit. It was time. She stepped inside, confused by the boxes of old clothes and books. "What is this?" "This is your mother," I said. We went through Martha's things, the smell of lavender still clinging to her sweaters. Then I opened the metal cabinet. I showed her the prenup she had signed and forgotten, the trust fund documents, the life insurance policy worth millions, all shielded from Julian, and finally, the original 800-page journal. "I protected you," I said, my voice cracking. "I couldn't stop you from loving him, but I could make sure he didn't destroy your future." Alina read the letter Martha had left for her, a letter written years ago predicting the need for strength. She cried, but this time it was the cry of healing. "You saved me," she whispered. "Both of you." Julian was sentenced to 15 years. The evidence was overwhelming. In the year that followed, Alina rebuilt herself. She started therapy with Dr. Evelyn. She reconnected with friends. And slowly I watched a new relationship bloom, not with a stranger but with Robert, the man who had stood by us, who had risked his life to get the evidence. One day Alina asked, "Dad, is it okay if I ask Robert out?" I smiled, a genuine smile. "I think that would be the best decision you've ever made." We went back to the storage unit one last time to clear it out. It wasn't a secret bunker anymore. It was just a room. We took the memories home. People ask if I regret waiting 3 years. I tell them this. Silence is sometimes the strongest shield. I waited because I needed to be sure. I documented because I needed to be bulletproof. And I kept that storage unit because a father's job isn't just to fight the battles in front of him, but to prepare for the wars he hopes will never happen. My daughter is safe. The fortune hunter is in a cell. And the fortress, it's no longer needed because the real strength is now inside her. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience. Don't wait for perfect proof if you are in danger. Get help. But know that sometimes, the quietest preparation makes the loudest noise when justice finally strikes.